because no one really knows what they're doing. But when you start out, you really, really don't know what you're doing, and you're still educating your ears. And so, to walk up somebody and be like, confidently say like, hey, I can come record, like I can record your band, I can do this. Like, those were scary conversations at times,
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Hello, rock stars. It's Lid Shaw, your host for Recording Studio Rockstars. I created this show to introduce you to real-world recording professionals, to hear their stories and learn from their experiences so that you can take your records to the next level and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Jonathan Roye. He is a producer, mixer, musician, and audio blogger from Nashville, Tennessee. In his own words, he has grown up obsessed with music, playing drums in garage bands, not garage band on your computer, but actual garage bands, trombone and jazz bands, and guitar and country bands. He has produced and mixed indie bands that you've never heard of, as well as working on #1 songs that you definitely have heard of. He has a drive to learn more and more every day to fuel his passion for learning music and recording, and he shares all that knowledge with you through his audio blog at jonathanroye.com and his YouTube channel called Mix Notes. He's also creator of woodshedaudio.co, a boutique sample and loop library in Nashville, Tennessee. If you are producing music using drum samples, you can find a growing library of cool sounds to fill in the sweet spots of your production. With sample packs like Shaker and Tamborine, for example, they keep it super focused and easy to use. I'll include links to all this in the show notes, of course, and I'll also link you to the free sample packs over there if you want to go check it out. Jonathan's credits include Kelsey Ballerini, Owl City, Esther Dean, Fearless Records, Forever, The Sickest Kids, The Rocket Summer, Sarah Ross, Caroline Cole, Universal Music Group, and many more. Thanks so much for joining us on Recording Studio Rockstars. Jonathan Roye, are you ready to rock?
Absolutely, Lidge. Let's go.
Dude, super glad to have you here, man. Really nice to meet you for the first time, too.
Yeah, it is. We've been e-friends for a little while.
E-friends, I like that.
Yeah.
Is that healthier for you than e-cigarettes?
I would imagine so. It's definitely more cool.
Nice, dude.
I would say.
Well, so I've done my best to introduce you in my bizarre and stilted way. Can you let us know who you are in your own words?
Yeah, I'm a freelancer. I mix a lot of stuff. I produce a little bit of stuff these days, and I write a tiny bit of stuff. Everything from working for publishers and labels to independent people in their bedrooms making records that find me on the internet, and everyone in between. And then, we run a sample company and the YouTube stuff and, all over the internet doing stuff. So.
You're so casual about it, man. You've been doing records for a while, yeah?
I started in 2005 in my apartment in college with a laptop and a USB microphone or something like that. And just recording myself. Back then I was a heavy jazz player. I was a big super nerd, and I was playing trombone in college and wanted to sort of do that thing. And that didn't work out, and I ended up finding my way into the studio.
Where were you in school?
I was in UTA down in Texas, Arlington, Texas, which is in the middle of Dallas-Fort Worth. So it was a cool town. UNT's there, SMU, TCU. There's a bunch of colleges. There's a bunch of players there. There's a lot of music that sort of comes out of there. When I moved to Nashville, it was funny because the same people I hang out with now are the same people I hung out with when I was in school.
Everybody moved to Nashville too?
Yeah. Slowly everyone just sort of migrates. We either go to New York, Nashville, or LA. And so,
yeah.
Yeah.
My brother is also a jazz musician. He was studying in Minneapolis, and I remember it was a big deal for him to, leave Minneapolis, which was a very supportive music community, to go to the Big Apple. He moved to New York for it. And,
well, you got to try. You know, you get sort of brainwashed, and you want to know if you can be good enough to make it, and you got to take that risk. And get out of your comfort zone, you know?
Making it in jazz means that you can pay your rent every month. Is that right? I'm just kidding. Sorry.
Not really. That's the thing. Yeah. It's like,
has that changed? Oh, you mean not really as in like it's a real struggle to make it in jazz, or it's...
yeah. Well, I mean, it's just one of those worlds that, you know, no matter how good you are, like you're still broke. You're still just a bass player, you know, trying to get on a gig to pay rent, you know, so.
Man, that's tough. It's so bleak. But jazz is so rewarding too. Just
it's great, and you know you get a lot. At least in Texas, it starts fairly early, like music in schools. Like I think I started in like 5th grade, taking lessons every week, and it almost becomes like a sport at times. And there's all region stuff and competitions and solo and ensemble and auditions, and just it never ends. And
well, if you're playing brass too, it's very band oriented, right? Like you're going to be, you know, the big stage is the football field, right?
Yeah, we did all drum corps is really huge. I did a summer of that. Orchestral stuff, chamber music, big band stuff, small group jazz. There's tons of it, and even you know there's a lot of big pop records that come out of that city as well. You know, I think Kelly Clarkson was down there. I remember going to school with her when she first blew up.
Really? Were you recording demos with her or anything like that?
I was playing in like punk rock bands around town, and it was I went to Crowley, and I think she went to Burleson High School, and so we would see each other just around town.
Nice.
And then, her, I think Demi Lovato and Selena Gomez, like I knew them when they were Barney kids, down there.
Barney kids.
Yeah, they'd go shoot Barney, and then they'd come. My entertainment attorney at the time had a studio I was working out of. And
really, we're talking about the big purple dinosaur now?
Yeah, the big
right
dinosaur.
Out of Dallas?
Yeah. Las Colinas had a bunch of movie studios down there.
Wow.
And so they would shoot that there, and then they would come over to the studio, and we'd record like these Disney audition tapes and, just like crazy stuff. So.
Right on. Well, so I got a lot of things I want to ask you about. I'm really excited to have you here. But before we get going, would you like to launch us with an inspirational quote, something to kind of get us thinking?
It's nothing. It's just something. I remember when I made the choice to sort of like chase the whole like support yourself with music thing. I remember that being a very big deal because I was like, I'm going to be poor for a long time. And a friend of mine, I'd had a little bit of success, and I remember an A&R buddy of mine told me he's like, it's a privilege to work in this business. And I think that's important because a lot of people get jaded and bitter, and it's really easy to like get beat down in this business. And I think a lot of it is you think you just have to realize like this isn't real work. At least I don't view it that way. My dad was a roofing contractor. My grandpa like framed houses, worked on the railroad. Like my mom worked in hospitals with cancer patients, like watching people die every day.
Wow. So those are real jobs.
Like that's real work. Like, come on. Like I wake up, I go to the studio at 10 a.m. and, load up some stems and make them sound good. You know, like what do I really have to complain about? The music industry isn't an equal opportunity employer at all. It's something you work for. And if it's meant to happen, it'll happen. And you make the commitments and sacrifices, and I think you got to kind of respect that. And if you can get your mind right there, you can start making some stuff happen for you. So
when you started out doing this and you were getting into recording, did you feel like this was something that you wanted to do as a career move, or did you feel like it was something you just kind of did out of a personal hobby interest first? What was your approach to that?
Yeah, that switch flipped for me early. I remember being in like 3rd grade. Like my best friend got a drum set.
That's awesome.
My best friend got a drum set, and I remember like going over there and watching him play, and the switch fired off, and I was like, I want to do that. Like that's going to be what I do. I don't know what it's going to look like or sound like or where it's going to be, but if I can find a way to do that, like I'll be happy. And so that's all it's ever been since then for me.
Well, it took me a lot longer. It wasn't until my first year of college, but I remember hearing guitar coming down the hallway of my dormitory, and I walked down and I kind of knocked on this door, and there was a couple of dudes, and one of them looked at me like, who's this asshole? I totally remember that. I was the young annoying freshman, but they were in there writing songs, and they were recording them on a double cassette deck. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what is that? Like you can do that. You can record music with 2 cassettes and make a song out of nothing but an idea.
Yeah. It was always, I mean, you go through phases. I think you whittle it down over time. You know, when you're a kid, like I just wanted to play, and that's all it was just getting as good as you can, as early as you can. But then, you know, you like, well, okay, I'm not going to be good enough to do that. You know, people that end up being artists and players are pretty special. But I still just had this crazy drive and love for music. And so I found my way into the studio and everything kind of clicked for me early on-ish. I got lucky in the beginning a couple times, so.
Do you ever feel like the whole thing, no matter what you decide to do, is some version of getting way into a new video game? Like when you're doing drums, drum corps is like getting intense about that is like trying to get really good and, you know, like just nail every level of a video game. And then when you go into the studio and start learning the gear and the computer and stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember even when I got like heavy into orchestral music, I was doing nothing but listening to excerpts and these symphonies and like ripping it apart in my head. And then when I got into the studio, it was all about, you know, the gear and learning the microphones, and like that is intimidating enough. And then it's like, well, I need to get better at guitar. So you go through like 5 years where like you do nothing but sit on the edge of your bed and play all day to like Jimi Hendrix records. And then you get into songwriting and like that's a video game. And then, you know, but then like 10 years go by and, you know, you kind of look over your shoulder and you're like, whoa, I've done a lot of stuff, you know, which is cool.
How often do you feel like you need to be looking forward? Because I know exactly what you mean, to look back on 10 years and all of a sudden you just see it clearly laid out. You know, hindsight is 20/20.
Absolutely.
Do you find that it's really important to sort of try and have foresight 20/20? Or, you know, what's your approach to that?
Absolutely. I think it's important to set goals and expectations, you know, early on. Because, you know, I think a lot of, like most people listening to this want to make it in some way, whatever that means to them. And so if you can figure that out and sort of set your expectations for what making it is, whether it's like being like the dude in your hometown that records people and you're able to support yourself and your family, or maybe you want a publishing deal or a record deal or whatever, then you can sort of start to position yourself, because you got to sort of change your game a little bit to get where you want to go. And so I'm a big goal setter. I'm always looking for ways. I like to reverse engineer it. So I'll be like, okay, well, like I want to get on another record that's going to be released. And it's like, okay, well, like, what does that look like? Who do I need to be working for? How do I get in that camp? Where am I at now? And how do I get, you can start to lay it out a little bit, you know, and you can start to find these opportunities and hop in front of them. So
strange alert here, but I'll mention once again that I'm really into barefoot running.
Word.
You know, so we're literally like not wearing any shoes. And one of my goals was to go run a marathon. That was a few years ago, actually. And I've been able to do a couple since then. And for me, that was a real experience of goal setting and understanding it really well for the first time in my life, I think, where I said, all right, I'm going to run a marathon. This is going to happen on April 30th or whatever it is.
Yep.
It's January 1st. I got 4 months. And so I went on, found out a 4-month training plan. And it's exactly what you said. It's like, take your goal, take the exact thing that's going to happen, and then just lay it out in a calendar, even if you can, you know, reverse engineer it all the way back to now, so that all you have to do at each step along the way is one small next move. Mm-hmm. And it's tricky to do. What about stuff like, you know, even with this podcast and, you know, reaching out to the audience, you know, reaching out to you guys, the rock stars, it's all a lot of stuff that's brand new to me. And sometimes it's hard to envision what your goal is. Mm-hmm. How often do you find that you're trying to set a goal and you don't really know what that goal is? You know, if I want to do a marathon, I can just go online and type in marathon in 4 months, you know,
read
or
all
like
up
that.
about it. I mean, with stuff like, I mean, even my own YouTube channel, I felt like it was something, I've always been a fan of the internet and I've always really respected it. I've had a lot of breaks from the internet with music. But with my channel, it was sort of just an experiment. And I was like, I'm just going to make some videos, good or bad, whatever, put them out and just see what happens. And if the response is good, like that was the expectation. Like I'll just keep going. And then like it just sort of snowballs over time. I mean, yeah, sometimes you just do stuff because it feels good, you know, and it's like, I'm not sure where this is going to go, but it's not necessarily a negative thing.
Yeah, it feels like the next step.
Yeah. And you know, you may not know what that looks like in 5 years, but you know, hopefully it's better than, you're farther along than where you are currently.
All right, cool. So let's pick a goal that is very understandable for a lot of people, even though we don't make records versus singles quite the same as maybe it used to be. Let's just hypothetically say somebody, a rock star is listening right now, wants to make a record, and that's a big goal for them. Break that down for us a little bit. Like, just talk about them making their first record.
Yeah, back when I was doing artist development and breaking bands, I think even now, like, putting out music consistently is important. In order to do that, like an EP, like every year at least, So yeah, you got to like set a date. Like, okay, 9 months from now, this is coming out. Good, bad, ugly, whatever. Then you sit down, you got to look at your resources. Like, we have this much money, we could get this much money. If we do like, those crowdfunding things, Kickstarter, like, okay, that's 2 months before the money's in our account and then we can get started. Well, okay, that's 2 months. We should probably have songs written by then. So it's okay, for 2 months, I'm going to do nothing but write the 50 best songs I can. I'm going to whittle that down to the best 5. I'm not going to make a full-length record because I'm never going to recoup on the cost, probably, because no one knows who I am. So if you get really OCD about it, you could break it down to just like daily what you need to get done or what you should be focusing on. And it's not that hard once you sort of set sort of a systematic, strategic approach. You do that for a couple records for 5 years and, be surprised where you end up. So...
Yeah, that's the point at which 5 years later you look back and you go, wow, I've made 5 EPs and 5 records.
Look at all this cool stuff I've done, all these cool places I've toured, all these great people I've met because of it, and all of a sudden maybe you have made it at that point. I don't know.
All right, cool. So share with us a time in your recording journey, your career, that was a real failure point, something where you just it really just didn't work, but maybe turned out to be a great learning experience.
Man, gosh, there's so many in this business. I remember after college, I had a lot of success, ended up getting a record deal and doing a bunch of stuff. And then, it's so up and down. And I remember I'd only known up because I got stupid lucky. Like, I signed my deal my last semester of college and just left. I didn't even walk. Like, I just went to LA and did this record, and a bunch of other opportunities came from it. And then, like, you hit the downslope about a year and a half later. And I remember I was like, man, this is hard. Like, I don't know if I can make lightning strike twice again. And I went back to school. I went back for like an art degree, and I got like 2 years in to like a graphic design thing. And, up comes another opportunity. And like, I literally just walked out of a photography class and went back to making records.
Art degree, the most lucrative profession on the planet.
Well, I figured, I was like, I could be a graphic designer. My sister's a graphic designer. Like, she does pretty well for herself. Like, she's got it figured out. So if I can do that, like, this will be okay.
Yeah, well, it's funny. You talked about being really lucky at the start and, can lightning strike twice? And my first thought was, is someone who says I was really lucky at the start an anomaly in this world of making music and records? And then my second thought was, no, wait a minute. Everybody who's into making music and making records was, quote, lucky at the start. You wouldn't even be listening to this podcast right now if you weren't lucky at the start. And the reason I feel like I can say that is because that's why we get so excited about making music. Like, that first band you're in, that first thing you did, it's so exciting. You just feel like it's the most fun you've ever done. And I know for me, and I would say maybe for a lot of people, is that later on, sure enough, maybe that first band broke up, then I was off doing something, and it can feel like a huge letdown after that first experience.
Yeah, well, I mean, you go into those slow periods, especially, I was just producing and writing. And so to go from like, oh, this is easy, I got this, like, I got a publishing deal, like, I got a check every month, I got a song on the radio, like, and then it just sort of like, because it just goes in cycles and trends change and you get pigeonholed in a certain thing, and then all of a sudden the phone stops ringing and you're like, oh shit, like, how, I got to figure out how to keep this going. Like, that's the first time that happens is a big upset, and just that combined with just everything, all the other failures you did with it, just getting fired from records and financial things, spending money on gear that you shouldn't have spent money on, and, messing up there, and, everything else, that getting burned on jobs, I think that's stuff like everybody has a horror story about one of those things.
Yeah, I'm paraphrasing here, but I remember F. Reed Shippen saying something along the lines of, if you're not getting fired from a record, if you're not getting fired, you're not trying hard enough.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that.
All right, cool. So tell us, when you hit rock bottom, when you have these failure times, how do you pick yourself back up? How do you keep going? How come you didn't quit?
Man, I got into that art program, and it changed the way I looked at music because it was a fresh perspective. I would see you learn all this stuff about layout and design and contrast and the rule of thirds and all these things. And I'd be sitting there in class, I'm like, oh, that's like mixing. I'm like, oh, well, like sounds contrast. You want certain sounds to blend, certain sounds to rub. Even the idea of like positive and negative space and how you can use that to your benefit when you're mixing to make something feel a certain way or do a certain thing. And it just sort of kept the fire going. And even I remember you do these like critiques where you present your project and you have to artistically stand there and defend everything you've done. You have to have some sort of logic and backing for what you do. And in record making, I think that's important because a lot of people just put harmonies down because they think it sounds cool. And it's like, well, like, do you really have a musical reason for doing that? Why does the song need that? Or is this just something like you just want to hear yourself play guitar?
Yeah. Well, and now here you are defending all your work on podcasts, right? No, but it's a great question, especially the harmony issue, because I've talked about this before too, and I've had these discussions. What do you feel about that choice of putting a harmony on because it needs it, or as opposed to this idea that sometimes if you're hearing the harmony, that's where it belongs? Like sometimes when you don't put the harmony on and you hear it in your head, you're allowing every listener to hear the harmony in their head rather than have it on the recording.
That's deep. I've never thought about it like that. I usually, how do I feel about harmonies? I usually put them down. I would rather have it and have the option to mute it later. But I don't know. I see some people just like stacking everything in the kitchen sink on a second verse. And it's like, dude, this is why your chorus doesn't lift. It's because you have all of this content. Like there's no contrast between the loud and the soft or narrow and wide, whatever it is. And so I'm always thinking about that. And it's like, well, how can what we add here, how is it going to affect what happens in 15 seconds,
Yeah, totally. Well, what did the Beach Boys do? Did we have stacked vocals on the verses, or was it just like just one guy and then the chorus drops?
But and I mean, at the same time, it's art. So, maybe it does work. There's no rules. It's just sort of, I don't know. It's still important to sort of think about stuff. I work a lot in like the TV sync advertising kind of stuff. And there's a bit more compromise there, I feel like, when you're making the songs and the production. So
nice. Yeah. Well, so tell us about a moment of success for you, something where things really came together and you were like, wow, this is really working.
I view success like when because mixing and engineering and stuff, it's a service gig. I don't think anybody would argue that. But so when my clients are successful, like that's a win for me. Like if I work with a lot of like younger producers that are on their first records or first publishing deals. And so if I can get them to the next rung in the ladder, like that's cool. I think like a month ago or so, I mixed this thing for a promo, like a trailer promo for these like Hunger Games DVDs. And they were hoping to get the placement. And I mean, in that world, like one of those placements is like serious cash, anywhere from like 10 to 40, 50 grand. And they landed the promo, and it was a bit of a pain, like a ton of revisions and stuff, but it's worth it, like that's cool when they call me and they're like, dude, we got the placement. Like it's going to be on it. Like we're working on a bunch of more, like it's going to help you in the long term, help them, everybody it's a win-win,
Yeah. One of the things that's been frustrating for me in the past is not always knowing, we live in a world where sometimes you're working on part of the record, especially if you're doing part of the recording and maybe you're not even mixing it or mastering it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're that much further away from the finish line. What tips do you have for anybody to stay connected with the artist or make sure that they know when the record comes out, get a link to it, are able to share in that, the glory of the finished product?
Gosh, text message, email, coffee, all of the above. I mean, it gets tough because we stay so busy and, I jump out of like 6 or 7 songs on a given day and other people do as well. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's the beauty of Facebook, I guess, is being able to keep up with everybody and see what everybody's working on. And so I'm fairly active there. And
So you're just staying connected to the clients you're working with.
Yeah. You know, I make it a point. It's something I'm a pretty big introvert, but I have to force myself to kind of go out and see people, you know, not just like my computer screen every day for weeks on end. So
I think that's a great tip. I think that's key.
Absolutely.
Is that understanding that, like, you know, even you doing the work you're doing and working with these great clients, you're still having to struggle a little bit with that. Okay, I'm going to make myself go out there and connect with people and not just live in my own little world.
Yeah, and it's just, you know, a lot of times it's like, hey, you want to grab coffee on Wednesday or Thursday or whatever, and you hang out for 45 minutes and see what you're up to. Even with, I do it with other mixers in town and engineers just to see what they're up to and trade war stories and what's working, what's not working, you know, so it's good stuff.
Yeah, I have found that for me, the best time of day to meet people is always lunch because I'm going to take a break anyway.
Yeah.
So I always try and schedule meetings for lunch. It's just like...
Yeah, I usually do. Yeah, like lunch is good, or I'll do coffee in the morning, like around 10 or something before people really get going every now and then. So.
Meet people at your studio kind of vibe?
Yeah, they'll either swing by. I mean, I'm on the row, so it's sort of centrally located-ish, or like we'll just go hit up someplace in 12 South or Berry Hill and hang out.
Yeah, nice. All right, so tell us a little bit more about what's going on for you right now. What's some of the stuff you're excited about? I know you've got Woodshed Audio, which I think sounds super cool, and I'd love to learn more about that.
Yeah, the sample company's fun. It's a sample and loop library. You know, like everybody's into samples and loops these days, and it started just sort of out of frustration because I needed like certain sounds and didn't have them, and people would always send me these like really uninspiring shakers and tambourines in their tracks, you know, and it takes you like 5 minutes to get them going. And I was like, well, why don't I just buy this stuff and cut it myself? And then I was like, well, if I'm going to do that, like, why don't I just do like a library and just keep it on a hard drive? And then my buddy was like, well, why don't you just do that and sell it on the internet? And so I was like, okay. So again, like it just snowballs. And I was like, well, let's just do one or two things and just see how it goes. And, you know, it's turned into like semi full-time job at this point. You know, We've got a bunch of stuff we're working on.
And so you guys basically, you looked at what already was there for loops and drum samples, and you found you're trying to fill in, well, maybe at the beginning, you're initially filling in spots that you felt like, well,
it was just stuff like I wanted. And then like, we did like a shaker and tambo pack. That's everything from like $500 Black Swamp Grover tambourines that like no one really buys to like super cheap.
I'm afraid I bought one of those.
Oh, I mean, yeah, they're cool, but like most track guys in town don't have them. They have some cheap plastic thing.
I finally traded it off.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, those are tough. It's like, do I really want to spend $300 on a tambourine when I could, you know, get something else? So it's a pretty wide variety. We did that. We did the same thing with shakers. We did the same thing. We went and did a cymbal library of just bright to dark, expensive to cheap, stacks, all kinds of creative stuff. We did the same thing with hi-hats and loops because I was talking to a bunch of producer friends of mine that were just like, I need like real feel like hi-hat loops. And I was like, okay, cool. Like we'll go do that. And we've cut like a ton of drums. We went to a Carl Tatz room, a private spot in town like last fall, and recorded like a ton of stuff for 3 days straight, you know, playing quarter notes on snare drums and tuning them up and down in every which way. So those will be out sometime. I don't know, whenever.
Nice.
I can get all this chopped and edited and mixed and in phase.
So tell the rock stars how, if they're interested in checking out your sample loop library, or they're interested in using more samples and loops in their production, how do they go about using what you've made? Like, how do you, if somebody's new to this, how do you incorporate?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of the one shots. So there's like one shots and loops. The one shots are just like WAV files, and they come stacked. So you'll have like different mic options. So you can, one track will be the direct mic, the next track will be room mics or an overhead, and you can sort of get the blend. So you get a sample that you don't have to be a mix engineer to use, that sounds authentic, that like sounds like something you'd want to use in a song, you know? And you can blend those and copy and paste them. The other loop stuff, there's Apple loops, which, you know, like conform to tempos, and you can just drag them in. You can do the same thing in the workspace window in Pro Tools. You can load them up in Machine, Battery. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I'm still learning, like Ableton Drum Rack, and those presets are coming. There's also a contact player that we're working on that'll be out at some point. So you can just throw, you know, 300 tambourines across a keyboard and just play them.
Yeah. So if you've got a song that you're already working on and producing and you feel like it needs a tambourine loop or a shaking tambourine, can you use one of the loops from your library and just sort of fit it right into your song?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
awesome.
As long as the tempo's in, you can do that. I mean, you don't even have to be in the studio. You know, I mean, we cut them all like on 67s and 251s and nice rooms through vintage.
You might have to say what a 67 and a 251 is for some of our listeners.
Yeah. Oh, it's, you know, old vintage mics that like, you know, $20,000 mics that like I don't have.
Yeah.
I mean, not many people can afford that stuff, but you know, we live in Nashville in some amazing rooms in town I mean, you can get pretty much anything here. So it's like, I'm going to rent all this gear and go record shakers and tambourines for a day.
That's cool,
and people just kind of stare at you weird, but...
yeah, so if you're producing music out there and you want to get the sound of, you know, high-end sounds from Nashville, I'll make sure to have links to all this in the show notes to take you straight over to Woodshed Audio and check out all these loops. And then I believe you have a free sample pack there too, right?
Yeah, there's it's a little bit of everything. I don't know, like 40 or 50 sounds, something like that, and loops and everything from like, you know, tambourines and shakers, cymbals to like programmed 808s and vintage vinyl, kind of gritty sounding stuff. So a little bit of everything.
Cool, dude. Well, that's great. And again, I'll have links to that in the show notes. And so if you go through that, take you straight there, and I'll make sure you guys know how to get the free stuff too. What else are you working on right now? What's exciting in your world right now?
I'm doing more production stuff lately, which I hadn't done, and I didn't produce a track in like 2 years. I was just mixing and doing YouTube videos. Got pretty burned out on that, and I started getting the itch to play with microphones, which was another reason to do the sample stuff, because I was like, oh, cool, I can just go move microphones and record stuff and talk to people.
Yeah, you don't have to hurry. You can take your time to come up with a new sound.
Exactly. Yeah. So that I'm doing more production stuff. I've got, you know, a couple young artists that something could happen with, and some fun EPs going on along with, you know, mixing stuff as well and everything else in the world. So
talk to us a little bit about your mixing process. You were telling me how you are in the studio working, but you now are able to take stuff home with you if you want to work on it. What does that look like for what's the difference between mixing in the studio and taking stuff home?
Oh man. Well, I mean, I'm all in the box, obviously, to be able to do that. So it's just external hard drives, Pro Tools, an iLock, and some headphones on my laptop. In the studio, you know, obviously I can prep, you know, when you have like right now I've got 3 EPs to do, which is like 30 songs. And so you got to prep all that stuff and clean the vocal tracks and color code it and dump your you know, that stuff you can kill a day doing that. So to be able to do that at home while you're not sitting in a dark room away from people, or to go to a coffee shop, throw headphones on and do that stuff, for me is pretty great, you know. And you can get a lot of stuff going, even production stuff. Like I'll go do pre-pro, sketch out tunes, grid them, throw them in Pro Tools with markers down, and I can start laying kicks and snares down. Then the next morning, come to the studio, you know, pull it up on the big rig, and I can start making all the moves and tweaks and do that stuff. So
nice. So you are talking. What does your coffee shop rig look like? What does somebody need to have to go?
Oh man, mine's
prep a mix in a coffee shop.
Mine's not the most hot rodded out thing. It's a MacBook Air, like a 2012 MacBook Air with a set of AKG like K240 headphones that I've just had for 20 years and know them really well, and my iLock, and that's it. You know, and I have a G-Tech like external drive, or I just sync it to Dropbox and I can pull it down wherever. That's a trip. So so the audio for all this stuff is living on your hard drive. Yeah. But your MacBook Air, which really doesn't hold much content on it, right? It's a small hard drive. Yeah, it's like a 256 gig SSD. Right. So you can't really fill it up with stuff, but you don't need to. It just runs Pro Tools and edits, and then you just plug your headphones right into the laptop. Yeah. So like I don't have to stay at the studio till 1 a.m. I can quit at 6, go home, eat dinner, and sit on the couch and prep the stuff for the next morning. That's cool, man. And then what's your DAW that you like to work out of? Pro Tools. Pro Tools. Yeah, that's what I learned on forever ago. And at this point, I just don't care to learn anything else. I'm tired of teaching myself stuff. Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, it's one of those things where I sort of realized one day
that all the DAWs that are out there, they do different things, but for the most part, they're all powerful. They all do 90% of the same things.
Yep.
And the real power is in learning one of them well.
Oh yeah, it's all like in what you can do, not what you have, you know. It's the whole like, you know, it's not really important how you record something, it's what you record that makes it special, you know. So
right. So make sure you're recording something good.
Yeah, that's the key.
Awesome. And then just tell us, we're about to go into the jam session here, but before we take a break and go to do that, tell us a little bit more about your YouTube channel and what people might expect to find there.
YouTube channel, man, everything from just tutorials on, you know, it's all inside Pro Tools. So if you're a Logic or Ableton person, the philosophies still apply. It's just, you know, in Pro Tools. But yeah, everything from just like quick mix stuff to plugin reviews. I'll just sort of check out plugins to even sometimes I'm just working on a song and I do something that works, that's out of the box, or just like out of left field, you know, that I'd never really tried before. And I'm like, oh, people may dig this. I use like stock plugins to make this and it sounds great. And so I'll do like a 5-minute. And it just sort of is what it is. And it's a lot of it, like now I kind of look back on it because I've done it for 3 years and you can see like the journey and the progression, you know, starting from somewhere and ending somewhere, and sort of how you sort of hop in and out of these techniques. And, you know, so it's pretty cool to go back and look through it all. But yeah, it's all just, you know, all inside Pro Tools, no real hardware stuff. There's a couple gear reviews, mic shootouts and things like that. But yeah.
Cool. All right. So Rockstar, as a reminder, I'm going to have links to all this stuff in the show notes for you to take you straight there. And then Jonathan has actually been kind enough to provide me also with some affiliate links for Woodshed Audio. So if you do click through my links, then I will get a commission on it. And I thank you straight from the heart in advance for doing that, because that's how I fund the podcast and the effort and all the hard work that goes into this. If you want to get to the show notes and you happen to be on an iPhone listening right now, all you have to do is open the podcast app. And then when you see, let's see, I guess it like a window shade, it scrolls up and you can see the logo for Recording Studio Rockstars and the episode that's playing right now. And then if you touch the logo once more, that will zip up like a window shade and you will see the show notes right there. And there will be links that you can just click on. So right from your iPhone, it's real easy to get straight to the show notes and do that. And then I'll also have them on the website. And if you're not signed up for the email list, go ahead and do that, and they will show up in your email too. More coming on that right now during this break, and we'll see you in a sec during the jam session. Hey everybody, it's Lid Shaw, and I want to thank you so much for listening to this episode of Recording Studio Rockstars. I really appreciate you, and I really appreciate your time. And as a way of saying thank you, I've created a special mix tutorial just for you, Rockstars, totally free, called the Mix Master Bundle. With it, you get over 2 hours of detailed videos watching over my shoulder as I mix a song in my studio. Plus, I give you the free ebook that explains how I recorded the tracks. And you get downloadable multi-tracks so that you can practice your mixes, including the Pro Tools session file, using nothing but stock plugins in Pro Tools, all of which you would find in any other DAW, whether you're on Logic or Studio One or Reaper. Maybe you're struggling with trying to improve your mix technique, or maybe you just simply don't have access to multi-track files or can't record a full drum set in your studio. I wanted to give you a chance to create your own mixes from full drum kit, bass, and guitars recorded in my studio. The song is called American Winter, and it's off my instrumental record Skadoosh, and it's all available for you totally free right now. All you need to do to get it is text Mix Master Bundle to 33444, and I'll send it directly to your email. Again, that's Mix Master Bundle with no space to 33444, or you can go directly to mixmasterbundle.com, enter your email, and I'll send all the files directly to you. Thanks so much, Rockstars. We'll see you guys in the jam session. Cheers. Hello, Rockstars. I'm back. It's Lid Shaw, Recording Studio Rockstars from the jam session, or we're here for the jam session, excuse me, and I'm here with my guest today, Jonathan Roye. John, how you doing?
Fantastic.
Dude, I just called you John. Do you go by John or just Jonathan?
John's cool. Jonathan's cool.
John's cool. All right, man.
Whatever you want.
Awesome, dude. Are you ready to jam?
Absolutely. Let's go.
Cool. Let's see. When you got started recording,
yeah,
What was holding you back? What was the thing?
Oh man, easily just like not meeting people, especially back then, because the internet wasn't near what it was. YouTube was like a baby, so it wasn't quite as powerful as it is now. But
now it's a big baby.
Oh, it's huge. It's massive. Like if you don't have a YouTube channel, like what are you doing with your life? Not really, but it's a big help. I've had a lot of big breaks off just through my YouTube channel, people reaching out. But yeah, it was just, I wasn't going out to clubs enough. I would sit at home and tinker in Pro Tools and do my own productions. And, I should have been at a show every night. Even now, like I should be going to something twice a week, 3 times a week. And I don't.
Yeah.
But
how old are you now, if you don't mind?
33.
33. Okay,
yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
But yeah, just not putting myself out there. And it's also scary, like, especially when you're new, because you're not super experienced and you're guessing, because no one really knows what they're doing. But when you start out, you really, really don't know what you're doing, and you're still educating your ears. And so, to walk up somebody and be like, confidently say like, hey, I can come record, like I can record your band. I can do this. Like those were scary conversations at times,
Yeah. But that's what it takes, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember my first string date, like I'd never recorded strings before, and someone called me and they're like, hey, you want to come do this? And I was like, yeah, I've recorded strings before, whatever, let's do it. And like I hopped online and found every blog I could find and called all my friends that had done it before. And I was like, I need you to tell me everything about how to do this, And you walk in and, you set it up and get through it, and it turned out great. But I feel like everybody, like you do a lot of that starting out,
That's sort of the fake it till you make it mentality a little bit, right?
I'm a huge advocate of that. Absolutely.
The key thing about fake it till you make it is make sure that just after you fake it, you make it.
Yeah. Like you got to do your homework. Like, don't just show up without any knowledge. Like, do some research. That's the great thing about the internet now is like you can learn all of this stuff online, or even just, having mentors, even if they're just friends on Facebook or whatever, to just like message and be like, hey, I got this gig. Like, what do I need to know about, I don't know, post and whatever, how hot does this need to be? Like stuff like that.
What's your best time of day, or when do you set aside regular time to learn?
Man, I try to learn something every day, and I usually do. And it's usually just in the middle of something. I'm Googling how to do a certain effect, or I'm listening to a record and I'm like, how do you make that sound? And I'll put pencil to paper and kind of break down what I'm hearing. Late at night, usually, I'm a big podcast, like book reader, so I'll usually read books at night on business or marketing or whatever.
Nice. Well, we're going to get to some business questions in a minute, so that'll be great. So tell us, what was some of the best advice you received, Jonathan?
Man, I remember in high school, like one of my lesson teachers told me like, I was having a lesson and it sucked. I was bombing pretty hard and he knew it and I knew it. And I remember he told me like the sooner like I stopped approaching this like a student and giving myself a handicap, and the sooner I started living and prioritizing like a professional, the sooner it would happen. And I remember he said that and like 5 switches went off in my head and like everything changed from like prioritizing the amount of rest you get to like how early you're getting there to how prepared you are, how you're treating clients, how you're, the integrity you put into your work, like all of that stuff will shift. Even if you're new, like the sooner you get into that headspace, the sooner you can start making stuff happen.
Well, I mean, that's impressive, dude. I mean, I think I may only have 1 switch in my head. I mean, like you have 5 switches.
Half of them are probably broken at this point, but...
Very cool. So tell us a recording tip, hack, or secret sauce, something that our rock stars can use right now.
Man, find a mentor. That's the biggest game changer. I mean, that's
check. You're listening to Recording Studio Rock Stars.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's so easy now. There's so many podcasts. There's so many like blogs, YouTube videos, Pensados places, like plus AES conventions. Like everybody's on Twitter, everybody's on Facebook.
But what about, you talk about mentor. So mentor to me means a little more than that too. I mean, because all these sources for knowledge can also be totally overwhelming and make your head spin.
Well, you want to like, the key is like getting the right advice from the right people. So it's like, to find someone that's actually doing what you want to do, and then being able to like, cause you got to get good at like filtering stuff. Cause some of these message boards are a bit obscene, as I'm sure we're all familiar with, but I see people taking advice from the wrong people all the time. And I'm like, dude, like this kid works at McDonald's and like, you want to know how to make like find someone that's like, not that there's anything wrong with working at McDonald's, but like find someone that's actually doing this for a living, that's done it.
You want to learn how to make a record or a hamburger?
I know, right? Exactly. So it's so important. I met this guy, Jeff Giuliano, who's a big mixer out in Delaware. He's like John Mayer. His credits are obscene. And just to be able to text that guy and be like, hey, like this label wants me to bill them for stems. Like, what do I do? Like, that's huge, And so if you can find that.
How'd you meet him?
YouTube. Just like emailed me one day. It was like, hey, you're the mix notes guy. Like, I watch all your videos. I'm like, why are you watching my videos? Like, but yeah, I mean, my first big label gig in Nashville, like came from like that Kelsey Ballerini record. Like the producer, Forrest Whitehead, was watching my YouTube videos. And we went and like had lunch one day and I started doing demos for him. And, so it's like you can reach so many people now that you couldn't. So,
all right. So somebody who's listening is new to this and maybe they can't start their YouTube channel teaching yet because they're just trying to learn this stuff. What suggestions do you have for ways for them to start connecting or reaching out and finding mentors? Should they reach for the biggest hit maker and try and connect with them, or is there somewhere else they should reach out?
Yeah, I think mentors to me, you could be a book, it could be, one of these websites. Like I used to subscribe to puremix.net, which is like Fab DuPont's thing up in New York, to learn stuff. And then just people in town, I would find the people doing the projects that I wanted to do, and I would just go work for free or just hang out and do nothing and bring coffee, which goes a long way because everybody likes free coffee. Like,
yeah. So,
and then meet people online. There's a lot of ways to find good information, So.
Yeah. Well, so Rockstars, a reminder to you, if you didn't know about it already, I have recently started the Recording Studio Rockstars private Facebook group. So if you'd like to come there, that's a great place to meet all the other listeners and rock stars out there, as well as I'm inviting all the guests on. So I'll certainly be inviting you, Jonathan, if you're already not on there.
Oh, I'm already in there.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
And so my hope is that it's also a chance for you to be able to reach out to some of the guests and at least say hello, tell them what you liked or didn't like about the episodes that they're on, and just connect with people. So it's a great way to do that. So it's Facebook/groups/Recording Studio Rockstars, I believe. And then I'll also have links to that in the show notes. So, all right, cool. Moving forward. Next question for you. Share with us, Jonathan, a favorite hardware tool, something that when you're doing sessions, you're in the studio, you love having this thing around all the time.
Speakers. Those are the best investment. It's boring, but it's true. Like, and I don't think people put enough value or like focus into speakers and placement of speakers and the room. And it's especially like room treatment. You can do so much stuff that costs like no money that will just drastically improve things. Like I walk into like a lot of these rooms, some of my friends that are producing tracks around town, and I'm like, they're like, yeah, I can't get my low end right. And I'm like, well, let me come over and take a look. And then it's like their speakers are like pointed at their feet, and one's here and the stereo image is smeared. And I'm like, dude, like, what are you doing? Like, and you straighten them out, even them, and they're like, wow, I can hear like everything now. And I'm like, well, no shit. Like, it's kind of speakers, like, and you don't have to get barefoots or anything crazy. Like I was.
Hey, what's wrong with barefoot, dude?
Oh, dude.
I'm barefoot right now.
You are. In the ice and snow, by the way.
Snow day here in Nashville.
Yeah, you don't need $10,000 speakers. You just need to know like one set extremely well.
Well, you talk about having the speakers in funny locations, and it really, like those originally, bookshelf speakers in living rooms might be one over here. People will put one on the floor, one up on a shelf, whatever. And maybe for some of those old Beatles records where everything's hard panned, it's kind of cool like that. But when you're treating your speakers like a stereo image, they need to be kind of symmetrically laid out like your head is.
And they need to be like pointed at your ears. Like that's the other thing. Like people have them like pointed down like at their stomach. And I'm like, dude, like your ears aren't down there. And you'll lift them up, even if it's like on books or something.
Well, unless they're a pregnant mom, maybe they're just playing, Bach for the unborn baby.
Yeah, but it's amazing. Like I've seen people just drastically, they're like, you know, you see the light bulb go off. Like they just never thought. And even an inch, you know, will change things. Like just making sure they're angled in. You know, you don't have to hire some acoustician to come over and do it. Just read a pamphlet and try to make it look like that.
Well, so I had this image when you were talking about that of the, what is it, the photo booth app that comes on your Mac computer where you can look and do a selfie, but it'll warp your face and your head. And like I can picture like doing one of those warp things where your one left ear is way down in the bottom corner and the right ear is way up in the right. And it looks all screwed up. That's kind of what happens with your speakers if you put them in weird places like that.
Yep. And then, you know, I always tell people like, I'm like, just get, like if all you can afford is like Rocket 5s, like cool, but use them for like 4 years and like know them inside and out. Like know what every record sounds like, know what the bottom end feels like, know what the top end feels like. It may not be as like full frame to something else, but if you know how to get around and make stuff happen on it, like that's all you need.
Yeah, and watch out for compression too. Little speakers like that, you start cranking them up, I think they're going to be compressing the audio too.
Well, yeah, and I mean,
so just it can fool you with as far as level choices.
And you know, and most people aren't in a perfectly treated room, and like that's the other thing is like the louder your speakers go, the more it's going to highlight the imperfections in your room.
Right, because it actually activates the resonant frequencies of the room.
So just like moderate volume, you know, and you know, your room can sound pretty good. You know,
your room is like a giant empty bottle, you know, that if you blew across the door, it would make a whistling or a doot sound, right? Think about it like that, and then you begin to understand what room modes are and why that, you know, turning up the volume affects the tone of the room and the tone of your speakers and mix. Starts to make sense, hopefully.
Yeah.
All right, so next question. Share with us a favorite software tool, something that's cool that people could check out right now.
I'm a big fan of the Universal Audio stuff. This plugin sounds so good these days. The UA stuff's great. The Slate stuff is great. Fab Filter. Greg over at Cush Audio makes a lot of really creative sounding stuff. Yeah.
All right, cool.
Nothing
awesome.
exciting.
I'll put links to that too in the show notes just so you can click through and go check them out. And those links, of course, will be on the website itself. So they'll be at recordingstudiorockstars.com/ I apologize for not knowing what episode number this is going to be, but I think if you just search in the little search window there on the website, just type in Jonathan and it'll take you straight to this podcast episode. So next up, Jonathan, how about a resource for the business side of recording and making music? I know you spend a lot of time, you said, reading about that stuff.
Oh, like a book or something?
Yeah, whatever you think. Anything you can think of. It could be a person, could be a book, could be a website.
Man, I'm a big fan of Seth Godin. I think I said that last name right. He's a big business marketing guy. He has a book called The Dip that's just, it's an easy read. It's a small book.
It's about me?
Yeah. But I read it probably once a year when I sort of like around the first of the year, you know, to get motivated. And I'm probably going to butcher the explanation of it, but it's basically, there's a whole saying like winners never quit and quitters never win, and how that's sort of bullshit because winners quit all the time. They're just quitting the right things at the right time strategically to stay focused.
Yeah, pivoting, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, he talks about that. He talks about anytime you set out on a goal, you know, there's this grind that's the dip, how it's a marathon, and how you can sort of look at that and see if it's even worth it, if the payoff's even going to be worth it for you. And then even through persevering, you know, he relates it to a marathon, and, you know, you're in a marathon. Like nobody quits a marathon at mile 25. Like,
right.
You know, like why would you? So, you know, it's a good book. It's an easy read.
I sure felt like it though.
Yeah. Oh, I can imagine. I
think that's key, man. I remember hearing him talk about the dip, and I've heard that expressed before. But, you know, when you start out on a new thing, this would go for making a record too. It's like you've got that initial and career, you know, you've got that initial burst, that feeling of like, I was so lucky when I started out, you know? And then the luck fades and you go into the dip and it gets real hard, and you want to make sure that you got enough stored up resource and energy and backup power so that when the dip hits, you can continue.
You know,
there's
nothing worse than quitting in the middle of the dip. You know, that's sort of like the, you know, waste of time and money and effort and everything. So sort of like strategically planning things, and, you know, is this life of wanting to be like, you know, a music industry guy worth it? Like, is the payout really, is all the commitments and sacrifices going to be worth it in the end, in 10 years or 5 years or whatever. So,
yeah, Seth Godin he's a great influencer, great inspirational writer. Just got really cool ideas. Some of his books are like Purple Cow is another one. It's about the idea of saying, you're driving along and you see these beautiful cows. I guess he was on a trip, saw all these beautiful black and white cows. And at first it like really caught your attention. And then after you just see them over and over and over, you just tune them out. And his point was like, once there's all that noise of all this amazing stuff, then if you really want to stand out, if they had seen a purple cow, all of a sudden they would have caught their attention. So the concept is, stand out, be different,
and that's
go
always
against the grain.
I'm always looking for lanes to hop into, and YouTube was one of those. There's a lot of ways to connect and legitimize yourself to a point. So
yeah. And then I won't go on this tangent too long, but one of my first podcasts was one about Bitcoin, actually, before I was doing the music stuff.
Yeah.
And it was called Bitcoins and Gravy. And I saw a blog post from Seth Godin where he was talking about the value of money, and I emailed him to invite him on the show.
Awesome.
And his rejection email to me was like, I was like, dude, I'm going to frame this email. Thank you so much for getting back to me. It was awesome.
Wow.
He's a rock star. All right, cool. So now, Jonathan, if you were starting out or advising somebody who is starting out and they're in a strange city, they're starting from the ground up, and they needed a simple setup. They got to find people to record, and they got to make ends meet in the meantime while they're recording, so they can continue doing this. What would you do? What advice would you have for somebody in that situation?
Well, you got to have a rig. You got to have a way to record people. So I'd probably save up, get a laptop used. I get an Apollo because you can pretty much build an empire with one of those things. And like an SM7 and your pick of a $300 to $500 condenser mic. I don't care what brand it is. Just go get one. And then you got to start meeting people, and I would play all the cards you have up your sleeve, whether that be online stuff or in-person stuff at shows. In Nashville, when I moved here, I was at a songwriters round, like any time I could afford to go down there and have a drink and hang out and listen to music, meeting people, recording demos in my apartment. And then to get by, I was doing web design. That's what I'd always done, freelance, to sort of pay rent. And yeah, I mean, that's sort of how you start. And then it's all about, reverse engineering those goals. And it's like, well, I want to get on a record. Well, who's making records? Okay, cool. Well, like, obviously this rock star doesn't need me, but this new kid does. So how do I meet him? And then, cool, he doesn't have any money, so I'm just going to work for free for him for like 4 months until something happens, and you can kind of start navigating.
So real quick question, because I feel like I've seen this before. You pick the new kid that you want to work with.
Yeah.
Sometimes you work with the new kid, and they really continue on, and that work that you did with them gets heard by other people. Sometimes you pick the new kid, and they just break up in the band. They're like, I'm doing a new project now. How do you deal with that? How do you find
tough.
people that are going to continue?
It happens to everybody. Sometimes you bank on a certain clique or group of people, and you work really hard on this stuff and just like pretty much take years off your life to make it sound like a record. And sometimes it goes on, someone hears it and they're like, who is this guy? Like, he beat the record. Like, hire this guy for the rest of this stuff. And that's happened before too. But yeah, sometimes, it doesn't work out, and you just got to like keep going. And that's, that's that perseverance and everything. And it's hard. It's hard for everybody. I even think, once, I know guys that have won Grammys, it's still hard for, like, I don't think it's ever easy,
Yeah, that's why you need, a steady method, a way to deal with it all, a way to approach it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's all about, I always look at income streams, something to kind of look up and research, and it's always like, okay, cool, I'm teaching private lessons. That's what, like, I've never really had a real job except for high school. Like, I worked at a retail thing, and I think I was a busboy for like 4 months. But after that, I was either teaching lessons, I was gigging, or I was like recording bands, or I started out doing like custom MySpace pages for bands. Like I could skin the CSS on it, make it look cool. So I would do that. I would do graphic design for like, I mean, you name it, and I would do it. And then I started doing like bigger websites for companies. So yeah, I mean, and you could sort of like, once you get all that going, then you add a YouTube channel onto it or something online. You have all these passive income streams that add up to a salary, and then you're like, oh shit, like this can work.
Yeah, well, I like you talked about doing website design. So I think the takeaway for Rockstars is, for our listeners, is that you don't have to be just doing music to be doing music. But what's key about what you chose as an alternative income source was that you picked something that was totally flexible so that when it was time to do music, you could do it, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. It like kept me from working at like Target or something, where you're on the clock, you got to be there, and you can't go out, you can't take meetings, you can't, do the things you have to do, even to put the hours in just to get good at this stuff. I mean, geez, like, that in itself requires just hours every day. I
just watched 8 Mile with Eminem on TV. The movie was on TV the other day. Remember, he was working in that factory, man. That factory they did not care about him making his music. Oh, no. They were not going to let him work on his music while I was there or have any flexibility.
Oh, man, I remember at one point, I was still in Texas, and I was looking for a steady job, and people wouldn't even hire me. I wouldn't even tell them about music or anything I'd done, because I knew like the second they saw it, they weren't going to hire me because they knew I'd like leave in 2 months. Because I would, but I still needed a check, So yeah, like I just got to the point where like I had a resume for like those kind of gigs, and then I had like a music sort of resume, and depending on who I was like working for,
Yeah.
So
well, that's right on, man. So tell us, the big doozy of a question. What's the single most important thing that our listeners can do to become a rock star of the recording studio themselves?
Man, just work. I always tell kids, I spoke at this thing at Belmont last fall, and I always tell kids to go home and put like a dot, like an LLC behind their name, or .inc, and then just learn from everyone everywhere. Don't show your cards to anyone. Maybe someone comes along, maybe they're better than you, maybe they're not. Doesn't really matter. And you just work and you worry about your thing. Try not to compare yourself to anybody else, and every now and then stop and see how far you've come, and you'd be surprised what you can make happen. So
what do you mean by don't show your cards to anyone else?
Just a lot of people, I think a lot of it's just comparing yourself to other people. There's a whole gear thing. Well, this guy's got all this gear and I don't have any gear, and that's why everybody wants to work with him. And it's like, well, I know people on laptops that are wildly successful, so obviously it's not the gear.
Yeah.
Or maybe so-and-so has this much money or that much money, or he did this record or that record. And it's easy to like start comparing things. But if you just sort of like, hey, this is my thing. This is what I want to do. This is how I want to do it. This is how I want it to sound. And you just put your head down and go and try to like, keep the distractions away. You can, that's sort of what makes you.
Yeah.
Instead of, because there's already them. Like you're never going to mix better than Tom, but you could be you with a little bit of that in there, and that's worth hiring,
And Tom's never going to mix like you.
I know. Yeah. Well, why would you want to? Tom mixes like Tom. And
so this is a memory I'm having of a session that I heard about it was back in the 90s, but the artist and producer Tricky.
Okay.
He showed up to go work with the band Garbage.
Okay.
Up at Smart Studios with Butch Vig.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing this great story about him coming on the plane, and he flew out there to go co-write a song, and all he brought with him was the Casio SK1.
Nice.
He just showed up at the studio, like, I want to make the whole track on this right here. So yeah.
That's amazing.
If you ever think you have to have the best. Now, of course, they may have used some other gear when they were at the studio too, but I love the concept too. He didn't show up with like an Elam 251 for $20,000. He showed up with a $5 or $50 Casio keyboard. Yeah, like I never want to be the guy that owns a studio. Like I don't think I could sleep at night if I owned a console and like, a $80,000 mic locker. And like I would rather just be friends with those dudes and give them money to use it and then go back to my, even my studio is not, it's all very in the box, and I don't have racks and racks of gear. I've never had racks and racks of gear. I've had friends that had tons of stuff, like guys that would drop like $200K on gear, and like they would never work. It'd just sit there. And it's like, dude, what are you doing? Like, So. Well, there's nothing wrong with really nice gear, but
no,
you want to use it. You want gear that you need and that you're using. I mean, you talked about your converters when we first got here too.
Yeah, that was a smart, for me, it's all about monitoring in the room. And, Obviously you need certain tools, right? And, quality monitoring setup is key. And so I think for about a year and a half, I was on this quest for just, I had a budget, like what's the best D to A I can find in this like $2,000 to $3,000 price point. And like, I'm pretty sure like Chad at Vintage Gang hates me because I would demo like something new every 2 weeks or something. And I finally found this like Pure 2 from Antelope, because a lot of times you'd plug this stuff up, or like summing mixers and stuff. It does the same thing. And it's like, okay, like that sounds different, but I don't know if it sounds like $4,000. And I don't know that like my clients are going to hear a difference or even care.
Yeah, but you finally got one, you said, right?
Yeah, I ended up going with this
something
mastering converter. The Antelope makes is Pure 2, and me and a buddy and my intern were in there listening, and like everybody was like, whoa, like that's the best those speakers have ever sound. And so like after like 30 minutes, I called them and I was like, I want this one. Like,
that's awesome. And I guess the takeaway is that you didn't just get it to spend money. It's you did spend money on a really nice piece of gear. So that's fine. It's just that you chose one that you were ready to put into full-time use and really benefit from.
Like one of those, and I have like one good solid recording chain that I rarely use because I don't really do overdubs in my spot anymore.
Really?
But if I can, I've got a Great River and an 1176 and a handful of mics to pick from.
That's cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much for being here, Jonathan. A reminder to everybody that I'm going to have links to Woodshed Audio so you can go check out the sample packs and the stuff that he's working on over there. And I imagine by the time you hear this too, there may even be new stuff showing up over there. And that Jonathan has been kind enough to give us some affiliate links that we can use just for you rock stars. If you click through the links, of course, I will get a commission on it. I appreciate that. And I thank you in advance for doing that. Again, that's how I fund the podcast and how I keep all this going. But I think Jonathan was also going to tell us about, you were mentioning you wanted to let the rock stars know about sort of a special offer for them.
Yeah, we'll do like a 30% off coupon code or something, and we'll figure that out, and you can put it up. And
okay, awesome. So. All right, well, so we'll make sure that there's in the show notes a special coupon that you can use to go through and go sign up for that. So again, click through on your iPhone, go to the website, and find the show notes there, and we'll see you guys around the studio.
Absolutely.
Jonathan, thanks so much for being here. How can people find you and start following you?
Oh man, the internet, thejonathanroye.com, woodshedaudio.co, YouTube /jroy82.
And then your YouTube show is called Mix Notes TV, right?
Yeah, Mix Notes. Just if you type in Mix Notes, it'll all like 200 videos or whatever will pop up. So.
Awesome, man. Great stuff. Dude, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate you joining us on Recording Studio Rockstars. We'll see you around the studio.
Great. Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, please leave a rating and review on iTunes to help reach more people. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to recordingstudiorockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And if you want more free content, all you have to do is text RS Rockstars to 33444. Again, that's RS Rockstars to 33444, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, and podcast updates. And I'll let you know about any upcoming giveaway offers, all totally free. Thanks for listening. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music.